It started with a coffee spill. A quiet Tuesday morning, the university campus still half asleep. The light through the admissions office windows was soft, gold-tinted. Inside, the receptionist was sipping a cup of dark roast, scrolling slowly on her tablet, the rhythmic tap-tap of her nails filling the silence. And then, the door creaked open. A young man stepped in, 17, maybe 18, tall, slim, skin the color of warm mahogany, dressed neatly, khakis, collared shirt, dark backpack. He carried himself like someone who was trying very hard not to take up too much space. He smiled, politely, quietly. "Hi," he said. "I'm here for the finalist interviews. My name is Marcus Carter." The receptionist didn't smile back. Instead, she blinked, set her coffee down a little too fast, and it tipped. The cup wobbled, then tumbled, hot coffee spilling across her desk in a brown, chaotic stream. She gasped, reaching for napkins. Marcus instinctively moved to help, pulling a handkerchief from his pocket. But before he could step closer, she spoke. "Stay back, please." Her tone wasn't angry, just tight, controlled, a little too sharp for spilled coffee. Marcus stopped mid-step, raising his hand slightly. "Of course, I didn't mean to." She didn't look at him. She was already reaching for her desk phone. "Security?" she said into the receiver. "Could you come to admissions? There's a student. Unregistered, I think. Possibly in the wrong building." Marcus stood completely still. Not angry. Not yet. Just confused. I... I think there's been a mistake," he said cautiously. "I'm Marcus Carter. I got an email, confirmation, about my interview. I can show you." But the woman still wouldn't meet his eyes. "That's fine," she said, brushing her skirt clean. "Just wait over there. Security will handle it." The room felt colder now. The early light didn't seem so warm anymore. Marcus sat down carefully in one of the leather chairs against the wall. The clock ticked. A minute passed, then another. He opened his phone, pulled up the email from the university. Big logo at the top, a name, a time. Finalist interview, 9 a.m. He read it again, just to be sure he hadn't imagined it. He hadn't. He belonged here, didn't he? The double doors swung open, and two campus security officers walked in. One older, stocky, with a tired look in his eyes. The other younger, clipboard in hand. The receptionist pointed. "That's him," she said. Marcus stood slowly, holding out his phone. "I think there's been a misunderstanding. I was invited for an interview." The younger guard took the phone, scanned it, then raised an eyebrow. "Marcus Carter?" "Yes, sir." The guards looked at each other, then at the receptionist. "Why'd you call this in?" She shrugged. "He just didn't look like he belonged. No ID badge. And he startled me." The older guard sighed. "You know we have finalists from all over the country today." "I didn't know he was one of them," she said defensively. The younger guard turned back to Marcus. "Sorry about that," he said. "You're fine. Just head to room 104, down the hall to the left." Marcus nodded. "Thank you." He walked slowly past the receptionist's desk. She still didn't look up, but as he reached the hallway, he heard her murmur under her breath. "Should have had a different name." He stopped. For a moment, just stood there, back turned, breathing. Then he kept walking. The hallway smelled like fresh paint and lemon polish. Bright motivational posters lined the walls. "The future begins with you. Diversity drives innovation." He passed another finalist, a white boy in a blazer, laughing into his phone. Their eyes met. The boy nodded once, casually. Marcus nodded back. But something in his chest felt different now. Tight. He walked into room 104 and saw a woman arranging chairs. She looked up, smiled warmly. "You must be Marcus," she said. "I'm Dr. Kessler. Take a seat. We're just getting started." Her kindness hit him unexpectedly. He nodded, sat, exhaled. Dr. Kessler pulled out a clipboard. Carter, right? Marcus D. Carter? Yes, ma'am. Great. You're early. I like that. And then, almost as an afterthought, she said, I expected someone different based on the application. Marcus froze. It was in the tone. Friendly, casual, but not harmless. Different how? More articulate? More white? He smiled faintly. I get that a lot. She didn't notice the shift in his voice. Or maybe she did, and chose to ignore it. Let's get started, she said. But Marcus wasn't listening anymore. Not really. His brain had already started playing the loop again. Didn't look like he belonged. Should have had a different name. Expected someone different. Each word like a whisper down his spine. Like turbulence he didn't ask for. He knew how to smile through it. Knew how to nod, speak clearly, sit upright. He'd been trained for this. Not just the interview, but this. The silent wait. The invisible rules. The constant need to prove. But still, this morning had taken something from him. Something quiet, but vital. Marcus clenched his jaw lightly. Focused on his breath. Reminded himself, this is just the beginning. Not the whole story. He didn't come all this way to fold. Not today. Not over a spilled cup of coffee. Names carry weight. Some names open doors before you even knock. Others make the person behind the desk squint, tilt their head, and ask again. Slower this time. Like maybe you said it wrong. Marcus had learned this when he was 9. It was career day at his elementary school. Kids brought their parents, nurses, mechanics, programmers. Marcus brought his mom. She showed up in her uniform, deep blue jumpsuit, name patch over her chest, aviation wings on the shoulder. She was a pilot, a black woman pilot. She stood in front of the class and talked about what it felt like to be above the clouds, how the air changes, how freedom has a sound, the low hum of a jet engine when you're 30,000 feet up and the world gets quiet. The kids were amazed, the teacher too. But after class, one of the parents said, without thinking, "That's incredible. I didn't know people like you flew planes." His mom just smiled, the kind of smile that meant I've heard this before. That night, she explained it to Marcus. Some people didn't mean harm, but their words still chipped away at you. You'll hear things, she said, unbuckling her boots at the kitchen table. Just don't let them in your bones. He was 9. He didn't really understand, but the phrase stuck. Marcus D. Carter, 17, senior, straight A student, born in Philadelphia, raised in Wilmington. He lived in a small 2-bedroom with his dad. The carpet was older than him, and the walls had that paint that flakes a little if you lean on it too hard. But the windows looked out at the sky, and for Marcus, that was enough. He loved planes, not just watching them, understanding them. As a kid, he could identify aircraft by sound alone. Airbus or Boeing, short haul or transcontinental, he knew them all. He would sit on the fire escape with a cheap pair of binoculars and track flight paths overhead, his notebook balanced on one knee. He wasn't the loudest kid in the room, not the kind to raise his hand every 5 seconds or dominate a group project. But he was always there, paying attention, absorbing. His teachers described him as quietly exceptional, and he had a plan. Top engineering school, aerospace design track, eventually FAA certified aviation architect. He didn't want to fly planes, not exactly. He wanted to build them, design the systems, reinvent the engines, solve the drag issues that had plagued commercial airlines for decades. That was the dream. It had always been the dream. His mom used to call him Little Blueprint, because even at 5, he'd sketch shapes on the wall, with crayons at first, then pens, then rulers and grids, always building something, always asking why the wings were shaped like that, why the cockpit curved inward, Why cargo doors open that way. She died when he was 8. Final approach. Malfunction in a storm. The investigation cleared her name. Said she followed every protocol. But that didn't bring her back. After that, everything changed. His dad shut down. Not in an angry way, just quiet. He still made breakfast. Still did laundry. But the laughter left the house. Music stopped playing. Marcus kept drawing. It was how he kept her close. He memorized her logbooks, wrote reports on aviation history. By the time he was 12, he was writing his own repair guides for model planes. By 14, he was interning at a local aviation museum, volunteering every weekend. By 16, he had submitted a design to the National Youth Aeronautics Symposium and placed in the top 10. It was his entry essay for the university competition that caught attention. Title, Wings Made of Memory. 1,500 words about his mother, his obsession with flight, and how he wanted to reshape the future of air travel. No drama, no sob story, just truth. Clear, detailed, mathematical, but human. He ended it with a line that his teacher underlined in red and wrote next to it. This sentence broke me. If my mother could navigate a storm from inside the cockpit, I can navigate one from the design desk. That line apparently made the judges pause. That line is what got him shortlisted. But being shortlisted wasn't the same as being accepted. There were still interviews, final selections, cultural fit assessments, and apparently still people who looked at his name and expected someone else. It was never explicit. That's the trick. It's the long pause after he introduced himself, the second glance at his resume, the polite tone that turns vaguely surprised when he speaks with precision. One teacher even told him, smiling, "Wow, Marcus, you're so well-spoken." As if that was unexpected, he learned early on how to respond. Smile, say thank you, move on. Because if you let it in your bones, it stays. His dad had never gone to college. He worked at a warehouse, night shifts mostly, but he always pushed Marcus to aim higher. You don't owe this world anything, he'd say, but if you build something in it, something real, it'll owe you. He didn't talk about grief much, or about Marcus's mother, but he always showed up to school events, even if he looked out of place among the blazers and cardigans. He'd stand at the back of the room, hands in his coat pockets, and smile in this quiet way, like he knew something the rest of the world hadn't figured out yet, like he already knew Marcus was going to make it. The invitation letter had come 3 weeks ago. Embossed envelope, big seal at the top, formal but warm. Dear Marcus D. Carter, we are pleased to inform you that you have been selected as one of our national finalists. He read it 6 times before saying anything, then walked into the kitchen and held it out to his dad with both hands. His dad read it, then looked up, teary-eyed. That's your mother, son, he whispered. She'd be flying laps around the moon right now. Marcus didn't say anything. He just sat down. Let it sink in. So when he walked into that admissions office on Tuesday morning, he wasn't just a kid hoping to get into school. He was a legacy, a worker, a believer. He was Marcus D. Carter, and someone spilled coffee at the sound of his name. He noticed the pause before anyone said a word, that subtle, awkward silence when he walked into the interview room. Not loud, not long, but sharp enough to cut through the air. There were 3 people seated behind a table. White tablecloth, laptops open, bottles of water, notepads, polished smiles that twitched for a fraction of a second as their eyes met his. The one in the middle stood. Mr. Carter? Marcus nodded. Yes, sir. Marcus D. Carter. The man hesitated, just half a second, then smiled. Of course. Welcome. Please have a seat. Marcus sat, back straight, shoulders relaxed, just like he'd practiced. To his right, the woman with the blonde bun adjusted her glasses and leaned slightly forward, scanning a paper in front of her. Let's see. Marcus D. Carter, GPA 4.0, national finalist. Design portfolio, impressive. She looked up. Is this all your own work? Marcus nodded again. Yes, ma'am. Completely unaided? He paused. I worked under supervision during my internship, but all designs and documents were authored by me. She nodded slowly but didn't smile. We'll verify that. The third interviewer, a thin man with a narrow tie, spoke without looking up. You don't sound like you're from Wilmington. I was born there, Marcus replied evenly. Lived in Philly until I was 6. Then we moved back. Still no eye contact, just notes. Then the middleman leaned back and folded his hands, his tone casual but clearly rehearsed. Tell us why you want to join this program and this school when you had offers from 3 others. I didn't apply to 3 others, Marcus corrected gently. That made the man blink. No? No, sir. Just this one. The blonde woman's pen stopped mid-stroke. Just this one? She repeated. Why limit yourself? Marcus glanced at the clock on the wall. Less than 3 minutes in, and already he was answering questions in italics. He gave a calm, steady breath. Because this school has the team that developed the hybrid wing-body aircraft test model, and the man who designed the new reverse thrust stabilizer teaches here. I want to learn from him. This is where my future starts. Silence again. Then the narrow tie man looked up for the first time. His eyes narrowed just slightly. You're very confident. It wasn't a compliment. Marcus didn't flinch. I'm confident in my work. The blonde woman shifted in her chair. We've had some issues in the past with students who weren't quite ready for the rigor of this program. Her words floated out like smoke, soft, intended to linger. Marcus didn't rise to it. He just said, I've handled full-time coursework, a part-time job, and internship hours for the last year. I'll be ready. Again, silence. Then the man in the middle smiled, tight-lipped. Well, Mr. Carter, let's talk about your essay. Wings Made of Memory. That's quite a poetic title. Unusual for an engineering applicant. My mother was a pilot, Marcus replied. It's about her. That at last got a reaction. All 3 heads tilted, slightly, like they were processing something new or unexpected. She flew for commercial airlines, the blonde woman asked. Yes, for 15 years. Another pause. Another moment where something didn't quite compute in their heads. The narrow tie man leaned forward. Forgive me for asking, but we assumed, based on your file, that Marcus Carter was someone else. Marcus tilted his head slightly. Someone else how? A beat. Then the man chuckled softly. Nothing serious. Just, when you walked in, we were expecting a different profile. You know how sometimes people don't match their name? The room froze for a fraction of a second. It was said lightly, casually, as if it meant nothing. But Marcus knew what it meant. He'd heard it before. In banks, at job interviews, once even at a dental office. You're Marcus? Wow. I just thought, never mind. The mismatch. When your name suggests boardrooms and bookshelves, and your face walks in with skin they didn't expect. He didn't smile. He didn't flinch. He simply replied, I've always matched my name. The woman cleared her throat. Of course, no offense intended. I didn't take offense, Marcus said, just noting the comment. The temperature in the room shifted, just slightly. The man in the middle coughed into his hand and forced a smile. Well, Marcus, thank you. We appreciate your time. The selection committee will review everything and contact you shortly. That was it? Marcus blinked. He looked at the clock again. 9 minutes. The packet said interviews would last 15. He stood. Thank you for the opportunity, he said. He turned toward the door, reached for the handle. And then the narrow time man called out, "One last thing. What does the D stand for?" Marcus turned back. "David." The man smiled faintly. "Strong name." Marcus didn't answer. He just nodded, then left. He stepped into the hallway and walked slowly past the tall windows, past the artificial plants and shiny linoleum floor. Every footstep echoed just slightly, like the building was too quiet to absorb them. He pulled out his phone, opened the email again, reread the line that said, "We look forward to hearing more about your passion, your background, and your vision for the future." He wondered if they'd really wanted to hear that, or if they were just hoping he'd fit the profile better. He texted his dad, "Done. I'll call later." No emojis, no exclamation points. His dad replied instantly, "Proud of you no matter what." Marcus stared at the message. His throat tightened, just a little. Then he closed his eyes and whispered to himself, "I've always matched my name," and walked on. Marcus had just made it back to the lobby when he noticed the camera. It was small, barely noticeable, perched in the upper corner near the admissions desk. A black glass dome, reflective, watching. He wasn't being paranoid. He knew what real surveillance felt like. He could feel it now. That unmistakable shift in the air when people start noticing you a little too closely. The receptionist, the one who spilled her coffee when he walked in an hour earlier, was on the phone again. Her eyes flicked toward him, then away, then back again. A pattern he'd seen before. Marcus stepped aside and sat near the window, pretending to scroll through his phone. But his mind was buzzing. He had done everything right. He had shown up early, worn the right clothes, printed his confirmation email, sat through an interview where they practically told him he didn't match his own name, and now he was back in the lobby, being watched. Again. Behind the desk, the receptionist leaned forward and whispered into the receiver. "Yeah, he's still here, sitting by the window now. No, I didn't say anything yet. Just keep an eye on him." Then she hung up and typed something. Marcus didn't miss it. She'd opened the campus security portal. He caught a glimpse of the login page reflected in the glass pane behind her. She minimized the screen too fast for him to see more. But it was enough. 10 minutes later, a man in a black vest with a university logo walked into the building. Campus security. He didn't look angry, just interested, professional. The way you might look at someone who might be lost or might be a problem. You weren't sure yet, so you watched, closely. He walked up to the desk. The receptionist nodded toward Marcus. Didn't even try to whisper this time. "He's not doing anything," she said, "but just to be safe." "Got it," the man said. Then he approached. "Excuse me," he said politely. "Marcus Carter?" Marcus looked up. "Yes?" "I'm Officer Tilden, campus security. I'd like to ask you a few questions. Nothing serious, just protocol." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Is something wrong?" Tilden smiled. "No, sir. We just had some internal miscommunication earlier. Mind stepping into the side room for a moment?" Marcus stared at him. There it was again. That calm, reasonable tone that made it sound like you were the one making things difficult, just by asking for clarity. He stood, slid his phone into his pocket, and followed the officer into a small room near the admissions hallway. A private space, neutral beige walls, one table, two chairs. Tilden gestured for him to sit. "Like I said, nothing formal," he said, sitting opposite. "We've just had a couple concerns raised about access logs." "Access logs?" Marcus repeated. "Yes, building access. Some of the staff were surprised by your presence in certain zones without an escort." "I had an invitation," Marcus said evenly, "and directions. From your office." Tilden tapped something into his iPad. "I understand. We're just cross-referencing entry timestamps with the ID scan system." "Did someone report me?" The question hung in the air. Tilden smiled faintly. Just routine cross-checks, sir. These days, with so many applicants and security policies, we try to make sure everyone's accounted for. Marcus didn't blink. I was accounted for, he said. I checked in at the desk. I gave my name. I went to my interview. Tilden nodded. And after your interview? I came back to the lobby. Anywhere else? Marcus leaned forward slightly. Am I being accused of something? Tilden shook his head, too quickly. No, sir. Just gathering information. But Marcus had already seen the screen, the security system interface. Tilden wasn't gathering anything. He was scanning for inconsistencies, and he wasn't even trying to hide it. This was what people didn't understand. It wasn't always sirens and yelling. It wasn't someone pointing and calling you names. It was this: a closed room, a smiling officer, a polite voice asking the same question 3 different ways. All because someone didn't like the way you fit into a building that was supposed to be open. Marcus sat back in his chair. Did the staff report anyone else? He asked. Any of the other finalists? Tilden hesitated. I'm not at liberty to discuss other cases. Marcus smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Because they didn't, he said quietly. Only me. In another room, just down the hall, the receptionist was replaying footage from the security feed. Zoomed in, paused, rewound. Slow motion footage of Marcus entering, standing, walking, like it was evidence. A boy walking through the right door at the right time, but with the wrong face. She forwarded the clips to someone in administration. Subject line: for documentation, just in case. Back in the side room, Marcus could feel the weight in his chest again, the thing that's settled when the air thickens, when your presence becomes a question mark instead of a period. He leaned forward. You know what this feels like to me? He asked. Tilden didn't answer. It feels like someone spilled their coffee when I walked in, and now they're trying to clean it up by proving I shouldn't have been there in the first place. Tilden shifted in his seat. I assure you, Mr. Carter, this is not personal. Marcus nodded slowly. That's what everyone says, right before it becomes exactly that. Eventually, they let him go. No apology, just a thanks for your cooperation. He stepped back into the sunlight outside the admissions building and breathed deep. The air felt sharper now. He took out his phone and opened the group chat with his dad. Typed. They pulled me into a side room. Security. No reason. I'm okay. Just wanted you to know. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then reappeared. You sure you're okay? Want me to come? Marcus stared at the message, paused, then typed back. No, I've got this. But even as he hit send, his stomach tightened, because this wasn't over, and he knew it. Somewhere inside that building, someone was still checking boxes, still rewinding footage, still trying to make a story where he was the question mark. And all he could do was keep breathing, keep walking, and wait for the next assumption to arrive. Marcus sat on the concrete ledge outside the admissions building, elbows on his knees, phone in his hand. He wasn't scrolling. He was staring at one thing: an email. Subject: finalist confirmation, interview schedule and welcome info. Sender: Dr. Emily Santos, Associate Director, Special Admissions Program. Time-stamped. University letterhead. It's clear, professional. He had already shown it twice that morning, first to the receptionist, then to Officer Tilden. And still, here he was, outside, like someone who had done something wrong. The subject line felt like a joke now. Welcome info. He read the body again, just to remind himself that he hadn't imagined it. Dear Marcus D. Carter, we are thrilled to confirm your selection as a finalist for the Horizon Aerospace Scholars Program. Please arrive at Admissions Hall A by 8:30 a.m. You are cleared to access the designated finalist areas and do not require an escort. Thank you for being part of the future. Dr. Emily Santos. He pinched the bridge of his nose, closed his eyes. This email should have been enough, but somehow it wasn't. 10 minutes passed, then 20. The sky was high and blue. Birds skimmed the roof lines. Other students walked by, laughing, chatting, wearing school hoodies. Marcus sat still, isolated in his own version of reality, where you could be fully qualified and still treated like a glitch in the system. Finally, his phone buzzed. Unknown number. Voicemail. He listened. Hi, Marcus. This is Dr. Santos from the Special Admissions Office. I was just made aware of a, situation involving campus security. I want to personally apologize for any confusion. You're absolutely where you should be. I've sent your credentials again to the front office and everything should be resolved. Please return to admissions hall at your convenience. I'll meet you there. She sounded sincere, slightly flustered, the voice of someone who hadn't expected her day to include a PR cleanup. Marcus let the message finish. Then he stood, dusted off his pants, and walked slowly back toward the building. Inside, the receptionist had changed her posture. She was sitting upright now, clearly aware that someone, somewhere, had called her out. She didn't meet his eyes, just waved him through without a word. He stepped past her and saw Dr. Santos waiting near the back corridor, holding a folder. She was petite, mid-40s, dark hair, sharp suit. Her smile was tight, but not fake. Marcus, she said warmly, walking toward him. I'm so sorry, that never should have happened. He nodded. Thank you for the message. We sent that welcome packet to everyone. It clearly said no escort was needed. I know. There was no reason for you to be questioned. I know. She hesitated. That was the hard part. She couldn't undo the morning. Couldn't give him back the quiet sense of pride he'd walked in with. All she could do now was paper over it with formality. I'm walking you back to the group myself, she said. He nodded again. As they moved down the hallway, Dr. Santos added, just so you know, you made an impression in your interview, a good one. Marcus looked at her, not smiling, not angry, just searching. Really? Really, she said. They said you were composed, clear, focused. Composed. He almost laughed. They hadn't seen the storm under the surface, the tension behind the stillness. They also said you were confident. That matters here. Until it doesn't, Marcus said softly. Dr. Santos stopped walking. She turned to him. Her expression changed. You're not wrong, she said, but it matters anyway. He didn't reply. He didn't need to. They both understood. Back in room 104, the other finalists were gathered in a loose semicircle, talking with a grad student about the next steps. Most were white. 2 were Asian. 1 girl looked Middle Eastern. Marcus was the only black student in the room. Again. He joined the group quietly. Some looked up, nodded. A few smiled. 1 kid, the one in the blazer he'd passed earlier, gave him a thumbs up like, glad you made it back. Marcus gave a small nod in return, but his chest was still tight, because even though he was back in the room, he wasn't sure he'd ever really been let in. They reached the aerospace lab, wide glass doors, gleaming metal prototypes inside. He could hear the faint buzz of machines and the hum of conversation. And suddenly, for just a moment, Marcus forgot about everything else. His eyes lit up, the way they always did around turbines and thrust engines, around designs with moving parts and possibilities. Dr. Santos opened the door. Inside, a young black woman in a lab coat greeted them. This is Professor Holland, Dr. Santos said. She runs propulsion systems for the department. She's also a former Horizon scholar. Professor Holland extended her hand. I've read your essay, she said to Marcus. You've got something special. For the first time that day, Marcus smiled. Not because he had to, not because he was proving anything, but because someone saw him fully and still believed. Professor Holland continued, "You remind me of me. Same love for the sky. Same sense of being watched a little too closely." Marcus let out a breath, a real one. "You know that feeling too?" "Oh, honey," she said with a soft laugh. "I still know it, but that's why I stayed. To make sure the next one through the door has fewer walls to break down." He nodded slowly. "I almost walked out earlier," he admitted. "I would have understood," she said, "but I'm glad you didn't." He looked around the lab. Machines, diagrams, equations on whiteboards, pieces of future aircraft resting on steel tables. His world, his language, his sky. Maybe, just maybe, he could still belong here. That evening back at the hotel, Marcus sat at the desk and opened his laptop. He pulled up the email again, the same one that confirmed his place. Then he opened a blank document. Title, "What Belonging Feels Like Sometimes." He started writing. The house smelled like jet fuel and aftershave. Marcus knew it didn't, really. It smelled like lemon wood polish and the same laundry detergent they'd used for 10 years. But his mind always filled in the rest. The ghost of his father's old flight jacket, the scratch of canvas duffel bags, the faint scent of worn cockpit seats. It was a house built on wings, literally and figuratively. In the hallway were framed photos of planes, not generic stock images, but personal shots. His dad in front of an F-16, helmet tucked under one arm. A Polaroid of Marcus at age 5, sitting in the left seat of a Cessna 172, his dad's oversized sunglasses slipping off his nose. Above the kitchen table, a black and white photo of Marcus's grandfather, Clarence Carter, in a Tuskegee Airman uniform, squinting into the Alabama sun. 3 generations, 3 timelines, 1 family legacy. Marcus sat at the table now, hands wrapped around a chipped blue mug, watching the steam rise. He'd gotten home from the finalist interview trip late the night before and hadn't said much. His dad had watched him walk in, quietly taken the bag from his shoulder, and just said, "You want food or space?" Marcus had answered, "Both." They hadn't spoken much since. Now the morning sun was streaming through the blinds and the house was quiet except for the soft hum of the fridge. His dad finally entered, wearing a t-shirt from the Black Pilots of America conference and a pair of old slippers. He didn't sit down right away, just leaned on the counter and watched Marcus sip. "You ready to talk?" he asked gently. Marcus nodded. "Yeah." His father crossed the room and sat across from him. "So?" he said. "Tell me everything." Marcus recounted the day in pieces, the good parts, the bad parts, the side room, the email, the final tour, the woman in the lab coat who reminded him what it felt like to be seen. His father didn't interrupt. He just listened, brow furrowed, fingers tapping slowly on the edge of the table. When Marcus got to the part about the security officer, the tension in his father's jaw became visible. And when Marcus repeated what the receptionist had said, "Just to be safe," his father's tapping stopped. "I've heard that phrase more times than I can count," he muttered. "Always sounds the same. Always means the same thing." Marcus nodded. "I didn't do anything, and I still felt like I was on trial." "That's because you were," his father said. "That's the trick. It's not about what you do. It's about how you look doing it." They both fell silent. Then Marcus said, "Sometimes I wonder if I want this for the wrong reasons." His father raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" Marcus looked down at his mug, swirled the tea around slowly. "Maybe I want it just to prove people wrong. Maybe I don't even love flying as much as I thought. Maybe I just hate being doubted." His father didn't answer right away. Then he said, "You think I joined the Air Force just for the clouds?" Marcus looked up. "I joined because they told me I wasn't allowed. Because my high school counselor told me I'd never pass the aptitude test. Because I walked into the recruiter's office and the guy tried to hand me a brochure for mechanical engineering, not the cockpit. His voice was calm but full of weight. I stayed because I fell in love with it, but I got in because I had something to prove. He leaned forward. That doesn't make your dream smaller. That makes it yours. They were quiet again. Then his father stood up, walked to the old wooden cabinet near the wall, and pulled out a box. He set it on the table, opened it. Inside were three small items: a flight patch, worn around the edges, a pair of vintage aviator wings, gold-plated and scratched, and a photo of Clarence Carter, his grandfather, holding those same wings on graduation day. These were my father's, his dad said, and then they were mine, and now he held them out. And they're yours. Marcus stared. The wings were heavy in his father's palm, heavy with history. I can't take those, Marcus said softly. Yes, you can. I'm not even in yet. That's not what they're for, his dad replied. These aren't about where you are. They're about who you are becoming. Marcus took the wings, held them like something sacred. Suddenly, everything felt still, like the moment right before takeoff, when the engines spool and the world holds its breath. He ran his thumb across the back of the pin, where the initials CC were faintly etched. These have been through some turbulence, he said with a half smile. His dad smiled back. And they came out the other side. Later that afternoon, they went to the small airfield just outside the city, the one where Marcus had taken his first flight lesson at age 12. The hangar manager still remembered them. Carter men, he called out, waving. Back to steal my skies again? They laughed, and within 20 minutes, Marcus was sliding into the pilot seat of a rented Cessna 182, his father climbing into the right side. It had been nearly a year since they'd flown together. Now, as the propeller roared to life and the wheels began to roll, Marcus felt that same familiar tightening in his chest. Not anxiety this time, but anticipation. He taxied to the runway, checked the flaps, set the altimeter. His father didn't say much, just watched, trusted. At 3,000 feet, the sky was endless. Clouds stretched like soft armor. The sun reflected off the wings. The wind was smooth. They flew in silence for a while. Then his dad said, "You still love it?" Marcus nodded. "Yes." "Then it's real." He banked left, turned toward the river, and let the plane ride clean and smooth, just like his grandfather had taught his father, and his father had taught him. 3 generations of men who had been told not yet, and not you, and wait your turn. 3 generations who flew anyway. And in that moment, Marcus knew. This wasn't just about rejection or success. This was about flight itself, the kind that lifted more than just wings, the kind that lifted stories, names, dignity, and dreams, the kind that reminded you who you were, even when the world tried to tell you otherwise. The room was colder than it needed to be. Not cold like winter, cold like silence, cold like fluorescent lights that buzz but never blink, cold like being watched through a pane of glass. Marcus sat in a metal chair bolted to the floor, hands folded carefully in his lap, staring at the dull gray table between him and the 2 airport security officers. The badge clipped to his chest, his proud pass into the Horizon Youth Aviation Program, had been removed. It now lay on the table like a discarded ID card no one believed belonged to him. He had been escorted here 15 minutes ago after an unnamed incident. No one told him what the incident was. All he knew was that a few murmurs from staff, 1 raised eyebrow, and a well-timed call had led to him being pulled aside and questioned. Now he was waiting for someone from Horizon Security Division to clarify a few things. But Marcus wasn't confused. He knew exactly what was happening. The first officer, a heavy-set man with a trimmed beard and crisp Navy uniform, leaned forward, hands clasped. "Marcus Carter," he said slowly, age 16, student, from Georgia, here on a program scholarship. Is all of that accurate? Marcus nodded. Yes, sir. The second officer, younger, sharper around the edges, was less patient. You seemed pretty anxious back in the pilot lounge, he said. That sort of behavior tends to raise flags. Is there something you'd like to tell us? Marcus raised his eyebrows. Anxious? I was waiting alone, like I was told to. You didn't think it was odd to be left unsupervised in a restricted space? The younger officer pressed. I didn't feel unsupervised, Marcus replied. Ms. Jacobs from Horizon HR told me to wait there. She said she'd be back in 10. Can you prove that? The older one asked, almost kindly. I mean, no, I didn't record it. The younger officer leaned back, arms crossed. Convenient. Marcus clenched his jaw. I didn't know I'd need to. Outside the room, behind a mirror Marcus suspected was one way, people were watching. He could feel them. Whether it was HR, program supervisors, or Horizon Legal, someone was evaluating every word, every breath, every flicker of hesitation. He wasn't being treated like a student anymore. He was being treated like a threat. The door opened. In stepped a third person, a woman in a sleek gray blazer with a silver badge on her hip. The Horizon Internal Compliance Division. Her ID said A. Ramirez. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Mr. Carter, she said, sitting down and placing a thin folder on the table. We'd like to clear up a few inconsistencies in your application. Marcus blinked. Inconsistencies? She opened the folder. Your recommendation letter from the Delta Regional Office. There's no confirming contact signature. Also, your previous solo flight hours haven't been verified by the FAA portal yet. That's standard, of course. But in a high-security program, we need full alignment before access is granted. Marcus felt the room tilt slightly. These weren't inconsistencies. These were bureaucratic delays. He knew his documentation had been submitted. His flight instructor had uploaded everything just last week. Those records are in the system, he said firmly. You can call Mr. Nichols. He manages the local airfield. He'll confirm everything. Ms. Ramirez nodded slowly as if pretending to make a note. We're working on that. In the meantime, tell me this. Have you ever been in trouble at school? Anything disciplinary? No, Marcus replied. Any police interactions? Juvenile citations? Marcus stared. No, never. A long silence followed. Then why? She asked softly. Do you think someone might have flagged you as a possible breach risk? Marcus froze. There it was, the real question. Not about records, not about procedures, but about perception, and the assumption baked into it that he must have done something wrong to deserve this room, this tone, this interrogation. His chest tightened. He wanted to shout, ask anyone else in the program if they're sitting in a windowless room right now. Ask if the white kid from North Dakota is being grilled about citations. But he didn't shout. He breathed. He looked her straight in the eye. I think, he said slowly, that someone saw a black kid with a badge and assumed he didn't belong. The older officer shifted uncomfortably. The younger one scoffed under his breath, but Ramirez didn't flinch. She simply closed the folder. That'll be all for now. She stood. Without another word, she left. Marcus sat still. They didn't even unbolt the chair. 10 more minutes passed before another staffer, not in uniform, just a nervous-looking intern, entered the room with an apologetic look. Mr. Carter, we're, terribly sorry. There was a mix-up. You're free to go now. Marcus didn't move. He stared at the intern. Mix-up? Yes, Ms. Jacobs confirmed everything, and your FAA flight log just came through. Why did no one believe me an hour ago? The intern faltered. I'm just here to escort you. Marcus rose slowly. He walked past the table, the folder, the officers, the silent mirror. And as he stepped into the hallway, something inside him solidified, something sharper than pain, heavier than anger. Resolve. Injustice didn't always wear a uniform. Sometimes it wore a tie. Sometimes it smiled while handing you a bottle of water in a cold room. Sometimes it asked polite questions, the kind that said, "You don't belong, and we're waiting for you to prove us wrong." Marcus had just passed the first real test of the program. Not the simulator, not the essay, not the flight hours, but the test they never talked about. The one where you had to stay composed while the ground tilted under your feet. As he exited the interview room, the hallway seemed brighter. Not because anything had changed, but because Marcus had. He walked taller, he breathed deeper, and somewhere inside something whispered, "This isn't where the story ends. This is where it lifts off." The first whisper came in a bathroom stall. Marcus had barely returned to the main program floor after his interview when he ducked into the restroom, hoping to splash cold water on his face and regroup. The tiled silence was a welcome break from the artificial smiles of program staff who now looked at him with either guilt or avoidance. Then he heard it. Two voices, whispering. "So he's still here?" one said. A pause. HR said they cleared it, but Captain Rollins didn't look happy. "You should have seen his face." The other chuckled nervously. "I heard he said, 'Keep an eye on that one. Not everyone fits the uniform.'" Marcus stood frozen in the stall, fists clenched. Not everyone fits the uniform. It wasn't just about him. It was a philosophy, a quiet, unwritten one, passed in hallway glances, traded between doors that didn't fully close. The Whisper Network. The term had always sounded like something out of a spy movie, but Marcus had heard his dad mention it years ago, when discussing why certain pilots never made captain, or why the youngest white cadets leapfrogged over veterans of color. It was real, not a system in the manuals, a system in the shadows. The real policies weren't always written, they were spoken, in low tones behind tinted glass with plausible deniability. And now Marcus could feel it tightening around him. Later that afternoon, as he was collecting his schedule printout from the program coordinator, he noticed something else odd. The printout didn't include his scheduled simulator slot, even though he'd signed up 3 days prior. "Sorry," the woman behind the desk said, not making eye contact. "Looks like it's full." "But I signed up on Monday," Marcus replied, holding up the confirmation on his phone. She typed quickly, avoiding his gaze. "I don't know. Maybe the system glitched." Another whisper. Digital this time. He didn't push back. Not yet. He just nodded and walked away. By the third day, Marcus was keeping notes. Names, phrases, scheduling shifts, corridor glances. He wasn't being paranoid. He was being precise. There was a difference. A senior tech instructor who used to be friendly now avoided eye contact. A student from a connected family started making veiled comments about people who play the race card. And when Marcus approached the student lounge, the room fell suddenly quiet. Still, he walked through it. He was not going to retreat into corners. But just as the shadow network grew darker, another kind of whisper began to rise. Supportive, subtle, unexpected. It started with a post-it note, left on his simulator logbook. Pale yellow, tiny handwriting. "You don't owe anyone your quiet. A friend." Marcus looked around. No one in sight. He folded the note and slipped it into his pocket. The next morning, he found a single document left on his chair during class break. A printed page from a Horizon employee handbook. The section on reporting discriminatory behavior anonymously. No signature, no name. Just a highlighter mark across the hotline number. Someone was trying to tell him something. That night, Marcus stayed late in the library wing of the training center. He wasn't reading, he was observing. People underestimate silence. It makes them speak more freely. In a corner booth, two instructors were murmuring over their iPads. The whole compliance team's on edge. FAA's watching everything now. Think they'll go public? If they do, the board will have to respond. The Carter kid, he's not just anyone. Word is his dad used to be. Their voices dropped lower. Marcus leaned back in his seat, mind racing. They knew who he was, and they were worried. Good. As he left the building, a woman approached him near the exit. Slim, mid-30s, wearing a Horizon staff badge. Mr. Carter? He turned. I'm Tanya Green. I'm not your instructor, but I work in flight ops. We haven't met officially, but I wanted to say something quickly. Marcus nodded slowly. She glanced around, then lowered her voice. You're not imagining any of this, and you're not the first. He felt a jolt run through him. There's a reason we don't talk about it in meetings, but there's a lot of us who see what's going on, who've lived it. Marcus swallowed. Why tell me now? Because someone needs to keep a record, Tanya said. You're not just a student anymore. You're a witness, and you have people behind you. We just can't all speak at once. Not yet. She handed him a card, her personal number. Call if you ever need backup. Quiet but real. That night, back in his dorm room, Marcus lined up everything on the desk. The post-it note, the handbook page, the printout error, the photos he'd taken of changed schedules, the incident report copy, the one he wasn't supposed to have but managed to sneak a picture of, Tanya Green's number, and one clean sheet of paper. He started writing, not a complaint, a record, objective, factual, documented, not a rant, a report, because the Whisper Network had power, but only until the whispers became evidence. In the quiet of that dorm room, Marcus Carter became something new, not just a scholarship student, not just a legacy of wings, but a quiet force of accountability. And in the growing silence, he began to build a storm, one word at a time. It started with an email. Subject, hang in there. Sender, unknown, securemail.pro. Attached was a screenshot of a memo, internal, timestamped 2 days earlier, showing that Marcus's simulator access had, in fact, been confirmed and cleared. The note in the system had later been manually changed. By who? The name had been redacted, but the implication was loud and clear. Someone had altered his file, and someone else was watching. At the bottom of the email, a single line read, "Some of us believe in fairness. You're not alone. Keep documenting." There was no signature, no trace. Marcus stared at the message for a long time before forwarding it to a hidden folder he had now titled Whispers and Proof. The next day, 2 more things arrived without attribution. The first was a USB drive, slipped under his door sometime between morning classes. It was unlabeled, but Marcus scanned it using his school-issued laptop in safe mode. On it were 3 short video clips, security footage, time-stamped. One of them showed Captain Rollins, the same pilot who'd made the comment about people not fitting the uniform, standing outside the program operations room with 2 administrators. In the clip, he was seen circling Marcus's name on a schedule and saying something. There was no audio, but someone had subtitled it with a note. Why is he in this slot? Pull him out. The second clip showed Marcus being escorted into the interview room. He looked calm, but the timestamp revealed something important. He had been detained for 49 minutes, not the brief check Horizon later claimed. The third clip was shorter. It showed Ms. Ramirez stepping into the lounge 5 minutes before Marcus's flagging. She was handed a small folder by someone, another staffer, who immediately disappeared through the side hall. A network, not just whispers, a pattern. The second anonymous drop came via a folded note inside his program-issued locker. If they ask for a quiet resolution, don't accept. They're scared for a reason. Marcus knew better than to share these findings immediately. He still didn't know whom to trust, even among those now whispering to him in solidarity. So instead, he built his case. Quietly, carefully, relentlessly. He began photographing hallway posters, time-stamping emails, screenshotting every schedule revision. He kept everything in triplicate: cloud, USB, print, every slight, every closed door, every mysterious shuffle of protocol, documented. Because justice, he realized, isn't always about loud voices. Sometimes it's built in layers. On the fourth night, while walking back to his dorm through the quiet campus courtyard, Marcus noticed someone sitting alone at a bench under one of the old metal awnings. A woman, older, gray blazer, small pin on her collar, the FAA crest. She looked up as he passed. "You're Carter," she said. Not asked, stated. Marcus paused. "Yes." She nodded slowly. "I saw your flight assessment, and I've been following other things." He didn't reply. He wasn't sure what this was yet. The woman motioned to the bench. "You don't know me, and you don't need to. Just know that some of us in the FAA aren't blind. We've seen this sort of pattern before." "Then why hasn't anyone done anything?" he asked, voice steady. Her eyes were tired but sharp. "Because these things are harder to prove than they are to sense, and because most whistleblowers burn alone." "But I'm not alone," Marcus said. She cracked a faint smile. "No, you're not. Just be smart. They'll offer you a shortcut, a quiet deal, some distraction. Don't take it." With that, she stood and walked off into the shadows, leaving behind only a file folder beneath the bench. Marcus opened it. Inside, old formal complaints from past Horizon trainees. Some dismissed, some settled quietly, but all with a common thread: bias, suppression, retaliation. The next day, the cracks started to show. In the lunch hall, an instructor who had ignored Marcus for 2 weeks suddenly gave him a quiet nod, one of respect or maybe apology. In the classroom, someone had left an FAA poster with "Diversity is Strength" highlighted in neon green on his desk. And when Marcus walked into a hallway training seminar, two cadets from another state program pulled out a chair for him and said, "We've been watching. Let us know how to help." Anonymous allies were becoming visible. Courage contagious. But so was retaliation. Late that night, Marcus received a formal notice from the Horizon Program admin team. His next flight assessment had been postponed indefinitely due to pending review of documentation. He knew what it was: a scare tactic, the kind that works on students who don't have leverage. But Marcus had leverage now. He uploaded the footage, not to social media, not to a blog, but to an encrypted file drop with a single share link. Then he emailed that link to two trusted names: Tanya Green, Flight Ops David Carter, FA, his dad, though not officially involved yet. The subject line was simple: "For the record, if something happens, let them know the truth was already saved." 2 hours later, Tanya texted him, "You're making waves, don't stop. Also, someone from the national office may be coming." Then another email from a staffer he didn't know. "Thank you. You've done more than you know. If they pressure you to talk it out privately, don't accept without oversight. We've got your back." By the end of the week, the Whisper network wasn't whispering anymore. It was moving, humming, rising. People he'd never met before nodded to him in corridors. Staffers handed him checklists accidentally with their notes exposed. "Watch Rollins under FAA review." And in a quiet moment before bed, Marcus looked into the mirror and said to himself, "You're not here to survive this. You're here to change it." Because when systems push people into silence, it's not the silence that lasts, it's the echo. And Marcus Carter, 16, underestimated no longer, had become the echo turning into thunder. The hallway outside the precinct conference room was heavy with silence, only interrupted by the soft buzz of fluorescent lights and the occasional cough. Inside, Jordan sat alone, his knees pulled close to his chest, the fabric of his hoodie bunched in his trembling fists. His phone had long since run out of battery, but he hadn't let go of it, gripping it like a lifeline that had snapped midair. The minutes dragged like hours. He was no longer crying, but his eyes were red and raw, and every few seconds he swallowed hard, trying to push down the lump in his throat. He kept replaying the moment the store manager had pointed at him, the instant the security guard had gripped his arm a little too tight, and the way Officer Denning had looked at him like a problem instead of a person. Then came the voices from the hallway. Low, urgent. One of them firm, familiar. The door opened. In walked Marcus D. Carter. He didn't burst in like a movie hero or slam his hands on the table like a man demanding attention. He simply entered with an air of composed authority, his presence shifting the temperature in the room. Two officers immediately straightened their backs when they saw him. "Mr. Carter," one of them began, but he raised a hand calmly. "Where's my son?" His voice was quiet, but there was no mistaking the command behind it. "Right here," came a whisper. Jordan stood from his chair, unsure whether to cry or run into his father's arms. The room seemed to disappear as the two locked eyes. Jordan's composure finally broke. He ran forward, and Marcus caught him in a firm embrace. "You're safe," Marcus said softly, one hand on his son's head. "I'm here now." Behind them, the officers exchanged glances, suddenly uncertain. The detective in charge cleared his throat, stepping forward. "There's been a misunderstanding, Mr. Carter. We were told—" Marcus turned to him, still keeping Jordan close. "A misunderstanding is forgetting someone's name. A misunderstanding is mistaking the date of an appointment. This was an accusation, one that could have permanently changed my son's life." The officer opened his mouth, but Marcus wasn't done. "Jordan was held for over 2 hours, interrogated, without legal representation, without notifying me. Tell me, Detective Hastings, does that align with your department's procedural standards?" Now Hastings faltered. "We acted on a report from the store manager. A store manager who assumed theft based on nothing but skin and presence," Marcus cut in. "And that assumption was given the weight of law." He stepped forward, lowering his voice. "I know your policies. I helped draft some of them. Do you know who I am?" There was a beat of silence before Hastings nodded. "Your Deputy Director Carter, DOJ's Civil Rights Division." A pin could have dropped. Jordan looked up, stunned. He'd never seen his father like this. Not just strong, but unmistakably powerful. A man who didn't need to raise his voice to demand respect. "That's right," Marcus replied. "And I've spent the last 15 years fighting exactly the kind of institutional behavior my son just endured." Silence. He turned to Jordan, brushing the boy's shoulder gently. "Go wait outside. I'll be right there." When Jordan hesitated, Marcus nodded. "You're okay now." Jordan slowly exited the room, the weight on his shoulders eased slightly by the calm steel in his father's tone. Once the door clicked shut, Marcus faced the officers again. "Now," he said, folding his arms, "let's talk about accountability." Outside the precinct, the evening air had cooled. A light drizzle misted the sidewalks, painting the streetlights with a soft, golden glow. Jordan sat on a bench just outside the main doors, hoodie pulled up again, though now it was more for comfort than warmth. His eyes watched the puddles shimmer under passing cars, but his mind was somewhere else. Still in that room, still trapped under the gaze of people who saw him as something to fear. Inside, Marcus Carter remained standing. No badge, no hand raised, just presence. Across from him, Detective Hastings still held a clipboard, though his grip had slackened. Another officer leaned against the wall near the coffee machine, trying not to look uncomfortable. "I'd like to understand," Marcus began, "how a 16-year-old sitting on a bench became probable cause for detainment." Hastings cleared his throat. Sir, we responded to a store call. The report stated the young man had been loitering, possibly scoping products. He had no ID on him. Because he was jogging, Marcus said, interrupting. You know that. You've confirmed that. Yes, but when confronted, he became anxious and defensive. He ran. Marcus blinked once, slowly, which any scared child would do, particularly one with every reason to fear police contact. The officer near the coffee quietly sipped, visibly tense. Marcus stepped closer to Hastings. Your department was already under review for its treatment of minors. Did you think no one would notice this? We didn't know he was your son. That did it. Marcus's eyes sharpened like glass. So if he had been someone else's son, some regular kid, you would have treated him like a criminal? Hastings flinched. I didn't mean that, he said quickly. I just mean, we didn't expect this situation to escalate like it did. But it didn't escalate, Detective, Marcus replied coolly. You escalated it. A store clerk called it in, you showed up with preformed assumptions, and you confirmed them with every biased lens you've been conditioned to use. You saw a hoodie, brown skin, no ID, and you built a narrative. He took a breath. Not to calm himself, but to be precise. I've spent years reading cases like this, suing departments like this, restructuring protocols that allowed this. I never imagined I'd be filing a complaint against a department in my own backyard, one that just made my own son a case study. The other officer finally stepped forward. Mr. Carter, sir, I don't think anyone in this room wanted to harm your son. We made a mistake, but we were trying to follow protocol. Marcus turned to him. Intentions don't erase damage. Protocol doesn't protect dignity. You don't get credit for meaning well when you've traumatized a child. Silence. Do you even know what he was doing? Marcus asked. Why he was there? They shook their heads. He was waiting for his track coach. They were meeting to discuss a summer mentorship program. He was early. He bought a water, sat on a bench, and waited. That was his crime. Hastings' shoulders lowered slightly, shame washing over his features. Marcus shook his head. This is why people don't trust you. This is why young black boys run. Not because they're guilty, but because they know how easily you can make them look guilty. There was a long pause before Hastings finally said, What happens now? Marcus narrowed his eyes. What happens now is I file a formal complaint. I send a letter to your commissioner. I add this incident to the DOJ's Civil Rights Oversight Database, and I follow up, because this doesn't get swept under the rug. Then softening just slightly, he added, But I also expect more from you. I expect you to own this and fix it. So the next time a child like mine sits on a bench, he's treated like a person, not a suspect. Hastings nodded slowly. Understood. Marcus turned to leave, but paused at the door. Oh, and Detective, he said over his shoulder, tell your team to wipe the footage from the internal holding room. My son deserves peace, not playback. With that, he walked out. Naulitsa, Jordan looked up as his father approached. The drizzle had started to fade. Streetlights flickered behind him, framing Marcus in a kind of halo. You okay? Marcus asked gently. Jordan nodded. Better now. Marcus wrapped an arm around him, and together they walked away from the precinct, father and son, side by side. And behind them in the station, people began whispering, not about a suspect, but about what it meant when power walks in and doesn't shout, but still changes everything. Jordan had always known his father's job was important, but until now it had always felt like a vague title attached to long hours, constant calls, and neatly pressed suits. Civil rights attorney didn't mean much to a 16-year-old, until it did. The next morning the story broke. Not through a press conference, not through some official statement, but on social media. A blurry cell phone video had captured the end of Marcus Carter's confrontation with the precinct. His cold words, his controlled anger, the stunned silence that followed. Man walks into police station, demands justice for detained teen, and gets it. By noon, the video had been viewed over 400,000 times. Hashtags began trending. Jordan Carter, son of justice. Profiled while waiting. Jordan had been sitting at the kitchen table when he saw it. The video. His father. Him, blurry in the corner, arms folded tight, eyes down. He didn't know what to feel. There was pride for sure. Awe even. But there was also something else. I didn't do anything, Jordan mumbled aloud. From across the table, his cousin Eric nodded slowly. Exactly, bro. That's why it's powerful. Jordan's phone buzzed again. Another interview request. News anchors, podcasts, activists, all of them wanted the boy in the video, and behind it all was the name. Marcus D. Carter, civil rights crusader. The man who had once taken on a major tech company for hiring bias, who'd stood on courtroom steps with families whose voices had been ignored. Now that name wasn't just on the news. It was opening doors Jordan hadn't even known were closed. Later that week, Jordan walked into school with his head held differently. Not higher, just steadier. But the stares followed him. The whispers curled around the hallways like smoke. Yo, that's him. His dad's the lawyer guy. He's famous now. He sued the city last year or something. A few of the kids nodded at him differently. Teachers were oddly formal. The assistant principal called him Mr. Carter and offered him a soda from her personal fridge. It was strange. Only his best friend Zeke remained untouched. You know, Zeke said as they walked to the cafeteria, you've officially crossed over. Crossed over to what? Jordan asked. Zeke grinned. You're not just you anymore. You're a Carter. Jordan laughed, sort of. But there was truth in it. That afternoon, he and Marcus were invited to speak at a local youth panel hosted by the mayor's office. Jordan hadn't planned to speak. He just came to support. But as Marcus finished his portion, he stepped aside and gestured toward his son. Jordan has something to say, Marcus said quietly. Jordan's heart froze, but he walked up anyway. There was a hush in the room. He gripped the sides of the podium. Eyes stared back at him, some curious, some expectant, others skeptical. My name is Jordan Carter, he began, voice tight but growing stronger. A week ago, I was sitting outside a store waiting to meet someone. I had no ID on me. I had a hoodie. I'm black. That's all it took. Silence. They said I looked suspicious. They didn't ask questions. They didn't wait. They decided. He paused, taking in the weight of his own words. I didn't ask to be a symbol. I didn't want to be a hashtag. But here I am. And if this has to mean something, let it mean this. What happened to me happens to others all the time. You just don't see their videos. He looked toward his father, who gave a small nod of encouragement. Let my name open the door, Jordan finished. But don't stop there. Let others walk through it too. Applause thundered through the room. Not polite, not performative. Real. The next day, invitations came pouring in. Student leadership councils, civil rights forums, even an aviation STEM program called and offered Jordan a scholarship. It's not just what happened to you, the director said over Zoom. It's how you responded. You stood there with the same dignity your father showed. That's leadership. Jordan's world expanded overnight, and yet he still struggled with something unspoken. That night, sitting on the back porch, Jordan turned to his dad. Can I ask you something? Anything. Do you ever feel like people respect you more because of your name than who you really are? Marcus smiled softly. All the time. Jordan frowned. So, what do you do with that? You prove that the name means something because of who you are, not the other way around. Jordan sat quietly with that. You know, Marcus added, the first time I walked into a courtroom, nobody cared who I was. They cared who I wasn't. But over time, I made them care. And not with noise, with results. With presence, Jordan nodded. Like you did at the precinct. Marcus turned. Like we did, because you stood strong first. I just followed your lead. Jordan looked at him, eyes widening. You really think I led? Marcus didn't blink. Absolutely. They sat in silence, the air cool, the sky wide above them. The name Carter would now echo through rooms Jordan hadn't even imagined before. But it wasn't the name that had changed everything. It was the moment he had chosen to speak. And that choice, more than any title, was what opened every door that followed. The grand rotunda of Westbridge Academy was unusually quiet for a Thursday afternoon. Sunlight filtered through the high-arched windows, casting golden rays across the marble floor. Normally, this place bustled with laughter, footsteps, and occasional disciplinary whispers. But today, everything paused. Dean Evelyn Harper was about to speak. News of Jordan Carter's detainment and the explosive aftermath had reached every corner of the academy. Students watched the video. Parents called the board. Teachers whispered in staff rooms. And now an assembly had been called. Mandatory. No one really knew what to expect. In the front row sat Jordan, shirt pressed, expression unreadable. Beside him, Marcus, calm, composed. The man whose name had suddenly forced a prestigious institution to confront something it had long ignored. Dean Harper approached the podium, a tall woman in her 60s with sharp features and an even sharper reputation. Her steel gray hair was pulled into a precise bun, and her signature navy blazer signaled authority before she even spoke. She looked out over the sea of students and faculty. Then she did something unexpected. She stepped away from the podium and walked to the front of the stage, closer to the audience, closer to the truth. I've worked at this school for over 30 years, she began, her voice steady. I have seen generations walk these halls. I've shaken hands with senators, doctors, CEOs who were once Westbridge students. And I've also seen students walk out of here with silent shame because no one ever told their story. She turned and looked at Jordan. Until now. The room fell into a hushed stillness. Jordan Carter, she continued, was stopped and detained by local authorities while waiting outside a store. He was profiled, let's call it what it is, not because he did anything wrong, but because of how he looked, because he didn't fit someone's idea of what was appropriate for that setting. She paced slowly, her heels clicking against the wood floor. We cannot pretend this has nothing to do with us. Westbridge is not a bubble. The world seeps in through every crevice of these walls. Whispers rippled through the students. Some lowered their heads, others leaned forward. This school, she said firmly, has prided itself on excellence, on building leaders. But true leadership, true education, begins when we're willing to look at our failures. And this is one of them. She paused, letting that land. There is a reason so many students of color walk these halls with a bit more tension in their shoulders, a bit more caution in their laughter, a reason some parents ask different questions during orientation than others. That's not imagination. That's experience. Jordan blinked, uncertain if what he was hearing was real. Dean Harper turned again, now addressing the faculty seated on the side rows. We are responsible, not just for academics, but for atmosphere, for the culture we breed silently by what we ignore. Then she returned to the center of the stage. So today we are making changes. Murmurs, straightened backs, raised eyebrows. Effective immediately, she declared. Westbridge Academy will implement mandatory bias and equity training for all staff, educators, administrators, and board members. There were audible gasps, a few claps, a couple of stiff arms folded. Dean Harper didn't blink. Additionally, we will establish a student-led equity council, a space where real concerns can be voiced and documented and acted upon. Jordan sat a little straighter. Dean Harper took one final step forward. And finally, I offer a public apology to Jordan Carter, to Marcus Carter, and to every student past and present who ever felt less seen, less safe, or less supported because we failed to speak when we should have. The room was completely still. The only sound was the faint hum of the ventilation system. I do not say this because of media pressure, she added, softer now. I say this because it's the truth, and we owe our students nothing less than the truth. She turned to Jordan. Mr. Carter, if you are willing, I'd like you to help shape this council. Your story has already opened eyes. I believe your insight can help open minds. Jordan was speechless for a beat. Then he nodded. Yes, ma'am. A quiet but powerful applause started. No whistles, no cheers, just hands meeting hands. Firm, respectful. Dean Harper returned to the podium. And now, she said, I would like to invite Marcus Carter to share a few words, as both a father and a civil rights attorney. Marcus stood. He walked with a quiet authority, no dramatics. He didn't need any. Taking the mic, he scanned the room, meeting eyes, students, teachers, staff. I was asked to speak, he began, but the truth is, I've said enough this week. What matters now is what you say to one another when no one is filming. There was a nervous chuckle somewhere in the back, but Marcus didn't smile. My son didn't ask for any of this. He didn't provoke it. He didn't exaggerate it. He lived it. And many others have too. The only difference is, this time, someone listened. He paused, then added, make sure this school continues to listen. Then he sat down. Nothing more needed to be said. Dean Harper returned to the microphone and formally dismissed the assembly. As the crowd stood and shuffled out, the atmosphere was changed, muted, thoughtful. Some students approached Jordan, patted his shoulder. A few simply nodded. One girl whispered, thank you. Jordan didn't feel famous. He felt responsible, not in a burdensome way, in a real way. As they exited the rotunda, Marcus put a hand on his son's back. You handled that well. Jordan looked at him. You too. Dean Harper caught up with them by the door. Mr. Carter, she said to Jordan, you are welcome in my office anytime. He smiled slightly. Thank you, Dean. Then she turned to Marcus. And you, thank you for holding us accountable. Marcus simply nodded. It's what I do. The video had only been online for 6 hours. 6. And already it was everywhere. News outlets had picked it up. Twitter, now X, had made it a trending topic under Nashidram Westbridge bias and Dashai's Jordan Carter. Instagram was flooded with clips, commentary, reaction reels, and duets. TikTok was on fire. Dozens of stitched videos, side-by-sides of Jordan's confrontation and think pieces from creators with millions of followers. Even LinkedIn wasn't safe. Jordan Carter had gone viral, but not for anything he did, for what he endured and how he carried himself through it. At 6:03 a.m., Jordan's best friend from Westbridge, Zoe, texted, Bro, CNN, you're on CNN. By 6:12 a.m., Marcus's law firm began receiving interview requests from major networks. At 7:40 a.m., someone leaked the full security footage from the corner store where Jordan had waited for his ride. The video that showed he never once acted suspiciously. Just stood there, looking at his phone, existing. By 8:00 a.m., a side-by-side video comparing Jordan's treatment to other teens, white teens, in similar settings had amassed 2.7 million views on TikTok. The internet was awake, and the sky was viral. Inside their apartment, Jordan sat at the kitchen table in stunned silence, toast untouched on his plate. The notifications on his phone never stopped. He'd turned the volume off, but the screen still lit up every 2 seconds. Mentions, mentions, mentions. Easter Jordan Carter Westbridge. You're the real Jordan Justice. That kid from the video. His name was now content. He didn't know how to feel. Marcus, pacing with coffee in hand, was deep in a phone call with a civil rights journalist from The Atlantic. On the couch, Marcus's wife and Jordan's stepmother, Nia, refreshed a feed she couldn't believe was about her stepson. "This is overwhelming," she whispered. Marcus finally hung up and joined them. "I'm sorry," Jordan said softly. "I didn't mean for it to blow up like this." "You didn't do anything wrong," Marcus replied immediately. "You told the truth. The world decided to listen." Jordan sighed. "It just doesn't feel real." "It is," Nia said, "and it's only going to get louder today." She wasn't wrong. By noon, Good Morning America requested Jordan and Marcus for a segment. The Root published an editorial titled "The Quiet Strength of Jordan Carter." Celebrities began commenting under Jordan's posts. Even a retired NASA astronaut tweeted, "We need more young people like Jordan Carter in our skies. Calm, clear, focused, salute." Jordan read that one at least 5 times. Meanwhile, the Westbridge Academy Board released a formal statement, written, not spoken, acknowledging the incident and applauding Dean Harper's leadership. It was cautious, corporate, and didn't mention Jordan by name. The comments were brutal. "Name him or this means nothing. No more sanitized apologies. You don't get to sit this one out." Other schools, however, took note. 3 regional prep academies issued their own policy reviews. One even asked to partner with Westbridge's new Equity Council. Change was in motion, and it had Jordan's fingerprints all over it. Late in the afternoon, as the sun began to dip behind the skyline, Jordan finally did what he'd been avoiding all day. He opened his DMs, hundreds, maybe thousands. He skipped the blue checks and verifieds and instead read one message that struck him deeply. "Hi, Jordan. I go to a school like yours. I've been stopped in the hallway twice this month for wearing my hoodie up. I showed your video to my dean. For the first time, he actually listened. Thank you." Jordan blinked hard, then read it again, then again. That night, Marcus and Nia sat Jordan down for what they called the talk part 2. "The first time we had this talk," Marcus said gently, "it was about how to survive in certain spaces. This time, it's about what happens when those spaces turn their attention on you." "You're in the spotlight now," Nia added, "and you didn't ask for it. But how you move from here, that's in your control." Jordan nodded slowly. "I don't want to become a symbol," he admitted. "I just wanted to feel normal again." "I get it," Marcus said. "But symbols don't choose themselves. People choose them. What matters is whether you use that attention to build or burn." Jordan looked at his father. "I want to build." Marcus smiled. "Then you already know what to do." By the next morning, Jordan had made a decision. He would speak, not in a viral tweet, not on a TV interview, but in his own voice. He filmed a video in his room, just him, in his hoodie sitting by the window. "Hi, my name is Jordan Carter. You probably saw the video. I wasn't doing anything. I wasn't loud, I wasn't angry. I wasn't even moving. But somehow, that made me look suspicious to someone." He paused. "I've lived with that feeling my whole life. Some of you know what I mean. Others might just be learning. Either way, here's what I want you to know. I'm not angry, but I am awake. I believe in fairness. I believe in the right to be seen clearly. I believe schools can do better. People can do better." He looked straight at the lens. "And I believe the sky is big enough for all of us." He posted the video. No hashtags, no tags, just a caption. "In case you wanted to hear from me, JC." Within an hour, the video hit 1.4 million views. But more importantly, the comments weren't about drama. They were about hope. Elsewhere that day, something else quietly shifted. The FAA reached out. A regional diversity outreach director named Kevin Chu emailed Marcus, "We saw Jordan's message. We'd love to connect about future youth initiatives." Marcus forwarded the email to Jordan with one line. "Ready to fly higher?" Jordan smiled and typed back, "Let's go." The envelope was thick, not the kind of thin, flimsy letter that told you, "Thanks for applying." No, this was heavy, stiff, cream-colored, embossed, and it had Jordan's name written in real ink, not printed. He just stared at it for a moment. It had arrived quietly that morning, sandwiched between a utility bill and a grocery store flyer, as if it weren't carrying the weight of a lifetime inside. Nia found it in the mail stack and placed it on the kitchen table like it was sacred. "Jordan?" she called softly but firmly. "You may want to open this." Marcus turned around from the sink, saw the seal, paused. "Oh," he whispered, "that's from them." Jordan slowly walked over, his heart already sprinting. A month ago, Jordan didn't even know the Skytrack Foundation existed. It wasn't one of those flashy scholarships every student Googled or chased. It wasn't advertised. It didn't have a catchy hashtag. Skytrack was exclusive, elite, quiet. It was also one of the most powerful scholarships in the world of aviation and aerospace. Created 20 years ago by the family of Commander Isaac Ellison, one of the first black military pilots turned commercial airline captain. Skytrack supported young, underrepresented students in pursuing careers in aviation. Every year, they awarded just 5 full-ride scholarships to students who demonstrated not only aptitude, but also resilience and leadership. Jordan didn't apply, he was nominated by Captain Amara Johnson. After their unforgettable meeting at the cockpit, she had quietly filed the paperwork, submitted a recommendation letter that Jordan never saw, and sent a copy of the viral speech he gave in Dean Harper's assembly. And then she emailed Marcus. "I've seen a lot of talent in my time, but what your son has is something rarer. Calm in crisis, clarity under pressure, and vision for others. I believe the sky is already calling his name." Jordan was shocked when he found out, stunned when the foundation followed up. And now the envelope was here. He held it in his hands for a moment longer, then broke the seal. Inside, a navy folder, gold lettering, and a letter addressed simply, "Mr. Jordan A. Carter, on behalf of the Isaac Ellison Skytrack Foundation." His breath caught. He read the first few lines, then again. By the third read, the tears started. "Jordan?" Marcus asked cautiously. He looked up, voice cracking. "I got it!" Nia clapped a hand to her mouth. Marcus blinked hard. "You, like, got it? Got it?" Jordan just nodded, the letter trembling in his hands. "I got the full scholarship, tuition, flight school, travel, internships, mentorship, everything." Then silence, then celebration. Marcus grabbed his son in a hug that said 1,000 things: pride, relief, awe. Nia wrapped them both in her arms, her own tears falling freely. For a long moment, they simply stood there, held together by joy and all the battles that led to it. Later that night, as the house calmed and the adrenaline wore off, Jordan sat by the window holding the letter again, as if making sure it was still real. He remembered the lowest moment, the detainment, the humiliation, the sting of being doubted for simply being, and now this, not just validation, opportunity, a future unfolding with precision and promise. Captain Johnson called later that evening. "I had a feeling," she said, "but it's still a beautiful thing to hear." Jordan laughed. "Thank you for everything." "Don't thank me," she replied. "Thank yourself. You didn't just survive that moment, you defined it." They talked for nearly an hour about programs, simulators, summer prep courses, Johnson promised to be there at his first official training day. "You're going to be brilliant in the sky," she said before hanging up. "Don't ever doubt that." The next few days moved fast. Westbridge Academy held a formal ceremony. Dean Harper announced the scholarship in front of the whole school, this time with Jordan's name clearly, proudly attached. Students cheered, some teachers cried. The press caught wind too. One journalist called it a historic turn in aviation access. Another wrote, "From Prejudice to Pilot's Path, the Jordan Carter story." Everywhere he went, people greeted him differently now, not with pity or whispers, but with recognition, respect. Even his old classmates who used to avoid eye contact now offered fist bumps and congratulations. But Jordan stayed grounded, still wore the same hoodie, still kept quiet in class, still helped his younger neighbor Malik with math homework every Thursday. He knew this moment wasn't just about him. It was a beacon for all the kids watching from the sidelines, wondering if someone like them could ever make it into those skies. One evening, while sitting on the rooftop with Marcus, Jordan asked, "Why do you think this all happened the way it did?" Marcus took a deep breath. "I think the world's been waiting for someone like you, Jordan. Someone who could show that strength doesn't always look loud or angry. It can look like calm clarity in the middle of chaos." Jordan stared out at the city lights. "I don't want people to remember me just because of that video." "They won't," Marcus said. "They'll remember how you responded, what you built after." Jordan nodded. The sky stretched wide above them. The scholarship didn't just change Jordan's path. It began shifting the stories told about young black boys in blazers and hoodies. It challenged school boards to review their policies. It sparked community forums on racial bias in education. It inspired new applicants to the Skytrack Foundation, many citing Jordan's name in their personal essays. Captain Johnson was invited to speak on a national aviation panel, where she said simply, "Excellence does not have one face, one name, or one zip code. The sky belongs to all of us." The night before Jordan's first Skytrack orientation, he packed carefully. His uniform shirt, flight log, clean notebook, the photo of his mom from back when she worked airport security, her eyes bright, proud, eternal. Then he placed the scholarship letter into his bag, folded carefully. As he zipped up, Marcus knocked gently. "You ready?" he asked. Jordan smiled. "Yeah, I think I finally am." Marcus walked over, resting a hand on his son's shoulder. "Go make the sky yours." Jordan nodded, then whispered back, "For all of us." The sky was still dark when Jordan arrived at the airfield. There was a soft silver mist rolling along the runways, and the floodlights cast long shadows across the asphalt. Everything felt still, quiet like the breath before a symphony begins. And today, Jordan Carter was taking his seat in the orchestra of the skies. He stood at the edge of the tarmac in his fresh Skytrack trainee uniform. The badge on his chest read, "Carter J." But the weight behind it was generations deep. It didn't just represent a student. It carried stories, sacrifices, hope. This was orientation day, and Jordan was early. Very early, but he didn't mind. He liked being first. It gave him time to absorb it all, time to honor where he was. As he stared at the hangar in the distance, a soft voice came from behind. "You always get to runways before the sun, or is today special?" Jordan turned. Captain Amara Johnson smiled warmly, dressed in her full pilot uniform, strong, commanding, but with eyes as gentle as ever. "Couldn't sleep," Jordan admitted. "Felt like I had electricity in my chest." She chuckled. "That's how you know you're meant to fly." They stood side by side, watching the early crews prep the aircraft in the distance. The rumble of machinery, the flashing beacons, the smell of jet fuel and morning dew. It felt like home already. The training facility was modern and sleek, tucked behind the regional terminal. Inside, massive simulators stood like monuments, and the walls were lined with photos of aviation pioneers. Ellison, Coleman, Bessie, Armstrong. Captain Johnson led Jordan through the halls. You'll be using those. She nodded toward a simulator the size of a delivery truck. Real-time flight control, turbulence modeling, engine failure protocols, everything. Jordan tried to keep his mouth from hanging open. He'd trained on basic systems before, but nothing like this. They passed a classroom where other Skytrack scholars had begun gathering. Jordan recognized two students from the scholarship announcement video, a girl with braids and sharp eyes, a tall boy with nervous energy but kind posture. Captain Johnson paused outside the classroom. I want to show you something first. Jordan followed her down a separate hallway, quieter, carpeted. At the end was a door marked Authorized Personnel Only. She tapped her badge. The door clicked. Inside was a cockpit mock-up, full scale, beautifully lit, like the inside of a Boeing 787's bridge. Buttons, switches, yokes, every detail perfect. Jordan stopped in the doorway. I thought this was only for senior cadets? Captain Johnson looked at him, serious now. You've earned this moment. She walked to the pilot's seat and gestured. Sit. Jordan lowered himself into the captain's chair. It was more than a seat. It was a throne. His fingers ran gently across the controls. Everything felt natural, familiar, as if he had sat here 100 times before, even though this was the first. Captain Johnson sat in the co-pilot's chair beside him. You know why I brought you here? She asked. Jordan shook his head. She continued, her voice softer now. Because every time you enter this space, I want you to remember that it belongs to you too. This cockpit doesn't care where you come from. It doesn't care what color you are. It responds to skill, to preparation, to clarity under pressure. Jordan looked down at the yoke. His hands trembled slightly. I still feel like I don't belong sometimes, he said honestly. Like someone's going to look at me and think I got here by accident. Or charity. Captain Johnson turned toward him fully. Jordan, you were never a charity case. You are talent. Period. You've faced storms most people can't imagine and came through calm. That's not luck. That's legacy. There was a silence, a powerful one. Then she placed her hand on the checklist between them. I want you to make me a promise. Jordan nodded. When you're in this cockpit, whether it's training or your first flight or 30 years from now, when you're commanding your own route, you fly with integrity. You fly with honor. You fly knowing that someone younger than you is watching and thinking, maybe I can do that too. Jordan's eyes stung. I promise. Captain Johnson smiled, her voice thick with emotion. Then we're done here. The rest of the orientation moved quickly. Introductions, simulations, safety briefings, interviews for FAA documentation. The scholars bonded over shared nerves and excitement. They exchanged stories, compared training hours, and laughed over mistakes they'd made on flight simulators. But Jordan moved through it all with a calm focus. Something had shifted in him in that cockpit. He wasn't wondering anymore if he belonged. He was deciding that he did. Later that evening, after the final workshop, Jordan stepped outside alone. The sun was beginning to set, casting a golden hue over the airfield. He pulled out his phone and called Marcus. Hey, his father answered quickly. How was it? Jordan grinned. Incredible, exhausting, unreal. He told him everything. Captain Johnson's private talk, the cockpit promise, the new friends. At one point he stopped. Dad? Yeah? I want to ask you something. Shoot. If Mom were still here, what do you think she'd say? There was a pause on the line. Then Marcus replied, voice warm but steady. She'd say, I knew it. She'd say, that's my son, doing exactly what he was born to do. And she'd probably cry. You know your mom? Jordan laughed softly. Yeah, I do. They stayed on the line a bit longer. No words. just the quiet understanding between two men who had survived something heavy and found their way to hope. As night fell, Jordan sat by the dormitory window with his training manual in his lap. He flipped it open and took out the picture he always kept folded inside. A black and white photo of his mom in uniform, standing in front of an old security checkpoint, smiling wide like the future was something you could hold. He taped it gently to the wall beside his bed. Then, using a felt-tip pen, he wrote something beneath it on a sticky note. "This is for you. The sky is ours now." He looked at it one last time before crawling into bed. Sleep came easier than expected. Because now Jordan had more than a scholarship. He had a promise, and soon he would have wings. Weeks passed, then months. Jordan Carter's name became familiar in the training center. Not because he bragged, not because he tried to stand out, but because of how he carried himself, with quiet confidence, with grace, with the kind of poise that only came from knowing where you came from and choosing to walk forward anyway. The final exam week arrived. Simulations, emergency response protocols, crosswind landing techniques. Jordan studied with a kind of hunger, not out of fear, but out of respect, for the sky, for the machine, for the chance to prove that he'd earned this. On the morning of the practical test, he stood again at the edge of the tarmac, just like he had on his first day. The runway ahead stretched wide and infinite under the morning light. Captain Johnson met him with a nod. "You ready?" Jordan gave a small smile. "Always." Inside the simulator hangar, everything was still. The test would be observed live by FAA evaluators. Real flight scenarios, real variables, every move monitored, every reaction timed. Jordan climbed into the captain's seat. The examiner sat beside him. "Simulated departure from JFK," the examiner explained. "Weather is light fog, crosswind from the southwest, minor turbulence on descent. Runway 22 left. Let's begin." Jordan's fingers danced over the controls. Pre-flight, communications, clearance, taxi sequence. He heard his mother's voice in his head. Calm, efficient, strong. "Keep it steady. Trust your training. Take off. Climb." Cruising altitude. Descent. Engine alert. Jordan responded instantly, following procedures, staying calm. As he handled the simulated emergency, he remembered the promise he made in the cockpit. The one to Captain Johnson, the one to himself. Fly with honor. Fly so others know they can. He landed clean, smooth, precise. The exam room was quiet for a moment after the simulator powered down. Then the examiner turned and extended his hand. "Excellent work, Mr. Carter. Welcome to the sky." A week later, the Skytrack graduation ceremony filled the regional terminal's event hall. Students wore dark navy blazers with golden insignias. Family members filled the rows, cameras ready, emotions high. There were speeches, laughter, tears. But when Jordan's name was called, something shifted. "Jordan Marcus Carter." The room paused. He walked up with quiet pride. As he took his certificate, a cheer broke from the back. Marcus Carter stood, applauding louder than anyone. Captain Johnson smiled beside him, whispering, "Told you it was yours." After the ceremony, press took photos of the graduates. Jordan stood with his class, then with Captain Johnson. Finally, someone asked for a solo shot. Jordan stood tall, hands behind his back, uniform crisp. The camera flashed. But in that frozen moment, Jordan wasn't alone. He imagined his mother standing behind him, her hand on his shoulder. "You carried our name well." Weeks later, Jordan received an invitation. It was from Horizon Airlines. "Dear Mr. Carter, we are pleased to offer you a full cadetship under the Horizon Junior First Officer track." He stopped reading, just smiled. His dream was no longer a dream. It was a job, a future, a runway stretching ahead with his name etched down the middle. On his first day at Horizon HQ, he wore the same watch his mother had once worn, the one she'd left in her locker the day she never came home. It ticked steadily as he walked through the halls, her halls now his too. During orientation, he saw a plaque on the wall. It had names of employees honored posthumously for their service. Her name was there, Danielle Carter, ground crew supervisor, 19 years of service. He touched the plaque gently. "I'm still listening," he whispered. Months passed. Jordan flew more and more. Regional routes, night flights, training with captains, co-pilots, stewards. He loved it all. The rituals, the teamwork, the weight of trust in every takeoff. But the moment that mattered most came unexpectedly. A high school invited him to speak. His old school. Mr. Lyons had organized it. He stood before the students, all of them restless and distracted, until he said one line. "I once sat in the same room and believed people like me didn't belong in the sky." Silence fell. Jordan told them the truth, not the polished version, but the raw one. How he was mistaken for a threat. How a name nearly cost him everything. How his father, his mother's memory, and one brave pilot helped him reclaim his story. He ended with this: "Your name is yours to define, not the world's, not a system's, yours. So write something worth carrying." The room erupted. Applause, tears. Teachers came up afterward with hugs. A girl whispered, "I want to fly too." A boy said, "I didn't know we could." Jordan just smiled. "Now you know." A year later, he flew his first co-pilot shift on a cross-country flight. As the plane lifted through the clouds, he looked to the seat beside him. An older captain, kind and steady. "You good, Carter?" Jordan nodded. The clouds opened. Sunlight spilled across the dash. And Jordan thought again of all the people who had walked before him, unseen. Those who had never made it to the cockpit. Those who had tried. Now their names flew with him, and he was carrying them all forward.